The screams came first. A sound so sharp and panicked that it sliced through the clinking of dishes, the chatter of customers, and the hiss of the coffee machine. The world seemed to freeze for a fraction of a second, until the gasps followed. Eyes widened, heads turned, and then came the pointing fingers toward the corner of the crowded street outside the diner window. Two little bodies were tumbling, tangled together, from the top rail of the playground's wooden fort, straight toward the hard concrete below. People saw it. They saw it, but no one moved. It wasn't that they didn't care. Maybe it was shock. Maybe they were frozen, calculating if they could even make it in time. Some parents clutched their own kids, pulling them back. Others just stood there, their mouths open, their hands over their faces, as if bracing for the inevitable. But one person didn't stand still. Amber Johnson, her hands deep in a tray of soapy dishes, didn't think. She didn't weigh the odds. She didn't pause to wonder if it was even possible. She only knew she had to move. Her heart kicked into overdrive as she slammed the tray down, sending suds and water splashing over the counter. Her manager shouted something, but Amber didn't hear it. She was already pushing through the glass door, sprinting barefoot, her non-slip shoes abandoned in the kitchen, across the hot pavement. In that split second, she saw their tiny faces. Two identical boys, no older than 4, their small arms flailing. Their screams weren't the playful kind. They were raw and terrified. Time slowed in the way it does when adrenaline takes over. She could hear her own breathing, feel the burn in her legs as her muscles exploded with a strength she didn't know she had. She slid across the rough ground, arms reaching upward, bracing herself for the weight. Impact. It wasn't graceful. She caught them awkwardly against her chest, the force nearly knocking her backward. Her knees buckled, pain shooting up her legs, but she held on. One boy's head buried into her shoulder, sobbing, while the other clung desperately to her arm. The whole world seemed to exhale at once. Amber knelt on the ground, trembling, murmuring over and over, you're okay, I've got you." Someone finally rushed over, a woman with a stroller who looked like she might faint. "Oh my God, I saw." "I thought," she couldn't finish the sentence. Amber didn't answer. She was checking the boys, her hands moving quickly, making sure nothing was broken. They were shaken, crying, but safe. She looked toward the playground and saw the broken section of railing they must have been leaning on. A cheap screw had given out, leaving a gap just wide enough for two adventurous little boys to slip through. The strange part was that no parent claimed them right away. There was no frantic mother or father pushing through the crowd to scoop them up. Instead, a group of bystanders stood awkwardly nearby, whispering. Amber frowned. "Where are your parents?" she asked softly, but both boys just clung tighter, their little chests heaving. The police sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Back inside the diner, her manager, a gruff man named Carl, stood by the door, his jaw tight. "You could have gotten hurt, Amber. That wasn't your responsibility." Amber looked at him like he'd grown two heads. "They're kids, Carl. Someone had to do something." He muttered something under his breath, but didn't argue. Instead, he went back to wiping down the counter, as though heroism was just a minor inconvenience during the lunch rush. The police arrived, along with an ambulance that the boys didn't need but were checked into anyway. Amber stayed nearby, answering their questions. She told them what she saw, how she ran, how no one else had stepped forward. It wasn't until the boys were sitting in the back of the ambulance, sipping juice boxes, that a black SUV screeched to a stop. The driver's door flew open and a tall man in a dark suit ran toward them, his face a mix of fury and panic. He didn't even glance at Amber. He went straight for the boys, scooping them into his arms. "Ethan. Evan. Oh God, are you hurt? What happened?" His voice cracked, and he hugged them so tightly Amber could see his hands trembling. The boys babbled through tears, trying to explain about the broken railing and how they fell, but Amber noticed something strange. The man's expensive watch, the gleam of his cufflinks, the sleek car, everything about him screamed wealth. He was clearly not the kind of dad who usually let his kids roam around without supervision. Still, he barely acknowledged anyone else. The police spoke to him, asking for his side of the story, but his attention stayed glued to his sons. He signed a form, declined medical transport, and without so much as a glance toward Amber, carried them back to the SUV. The doors slammed. The engine roared. And just like that, they were gone. Amber stood there, her hands still shaking, a faint ache spreading through her arms from the weight of the boys. She didn't know who the man was. She didn't know why he hadn't thanked her. And honestly, she didn't care. She hadn't done it for recognition. She went back inside, slipped her wet shoes back on, and finished her shift. But later that night, when the diner was quiet and she was wiping down the last of the tables, a thought crept into her mind. Who leaves their kids somewhere long enough for something like that to happen? Why had no one been there when they fell? And why did the man's face look so haunted, even as he held them? Amber didn't know it yet, but saving those boys was only the beginning. Her life, which had been a steady, unremarkable stream of double shifts and overdue bills, was about to be pulled into a current far bigger than she could imagine. And the man in the dark suit? He wasn't just some random father. He was someone whose name could buy headlines. Someone who had built walls so high around his world that no one dared climb them. Someone who would soon realize that the woman who had saved his sons wasn't just a waitress. She was the one person who might change everything. The next morning, Amber woke to the usual hum of the city, honking cars, distant sirens, and the smell of fresh coffee drifting in through her cracked window. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes and glanced at her phone. No missed calls. No messages. Just the same long list of bills waiting to be paid, the same reminder that life moved slowly, and sometimes painfully, for people like her. She didn't think much about the twins at first. It had been a frantic moment, a burst of adrenaline, and then they were gone, swept back into a world Amber knew nothing about. Still, the image of their tear-streaked faces haunted her throughout the day. How could a parent just vanish after something so close to tragedy? That question dug under her skin. At the diner, the lunch rush was merciless. The smell of fried food and fresh bread filled the air as Amber moved between tables, her mind distracted. Carl, the manager, noticed her quiet mood and waved her over. "Hey, you all right?" he asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward her. Amber took a sip but kept her gaze steady. "Yeah, just thinking about those kids. The twins. They fell right outside." Carl nodded. "Yeah, I saw the mess. That rich guy came in and scooped them up like they were glass." Amber frowned. "Did you hear his name?" "Something like Jameson," Carl said. "Big shot around here. Owns half the buildings downtown, or so the rumor goes." That name tugged at Amber's memory. She'd heard whispers at the diner before, stories about a man named Charles Jameson, a billionaire who kept his family hidden from the public eye. Not much was known except that he was powerful and private, his face rarely in the news, his family shielded by layers of security. Amber felt a pang of curiosity mixed with something else, empathy. What kind of man could be so wrapped up in his world that his kids fell unnoticed? What ghosts haunted the man behind that polished exterior? The afternoon blurred by, but Amber couldn't shake the feeling that her life and theirs were intertwined now. That evening, Amber was closing the diner alone when the doorbell jingled softly. She glanced up, surprised. It was rare for anyone to come by after hours. Standing in the doorway was a man in a tailored suit, not Charles Jameson, but someone who looked familiar. The waiter from earlier that day? No, this was a different man, younger, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. "Ms. Johnson?" he asked. Amber nodded cautiously. My name is Marcus, he said. I'm Charles Jameson's assistant. My boss asked me to find you. Amber blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. We want to thank you. Properly. For what you did today. Saving the twins. Amber shook her head. I didn't do anything special. Marcus smiled softly. Sometimes, the most ordinary acts are the most extraordinary. He'd like to meet you. That simple sentence sent Amber's world spinning. The man who owned more money and power than she could imagine wanted to meet her. The waitress who spent her days wiping tables and serving coffee. But something told her this meeting was more than a thank you. It was an invitation, or maybe a summons, into a world she'd only glimpsed from afar. When Amber arrived at the Jameson estate the next day, her heart hammered with nerves and uncertainty. The mansion was vast, a fortress of glass and stone, surrounded by manicured gardens and towering gates. She felt out of place, a small figure in worn sneakers and a faded jacket stepping into a world of silk and gold. Charles Jameson greeted her in his study, a tall man with steel-gray eyes that seemed to look right through her. His presence was commanding but weary, like someone carrying a burden no money could lift. I want to thank you, Amber, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. You saved my sons today. You saved them when I failed to. Amber swallowed hard. I'm just glad they're okay. Jameson looked down at his hands, clenched on the mahogany desk. I wasn't there. I've been distant. Too busy with my work, my deals, trying to build an empire for my family, but losing the parts that matter most. Tears glistened in his eyes, and for the first time, Amber saw a man broken by his own choices. You don't have to pretend with me, Amber said softly. No one's perfect. We all mess up. Jameson nodded slowly. I want to make it right. For my boys. And I want you to help me. Amber blinked. Me? How? I want you to be part of their lives. To teach me how to be a better father, and for my sons to know someone who truly cares. Amber's breath caught. This was more than she'd imagined. From the street to the mansion, from a single act of courage to a chance to change a life, theirs and hers. She realized then that sometimes, saving someone else could save you too. Amber felt the weight of Charles's words settle heavily in the room. This was no casual invitation. It was a lifeline extended to her, as much as it was to his family. She swallowed her nerves and nodded slowly. I'll do my best, she said. For them. The following days unfolded in a way Amber never could have anticipated. She began spending time at the Jameson estate, helping with the boys, Ethan and Evan, who, despite their near fall, were full of energy and curiosity. They clung to Amber like she was their anchor in a storm, laughing freely when she played with them, trusting her in a way that warmed her heart. Charles watched quietly, sometimes from a distance, sometimes joining in awkwardly. It was clear he was a man trying to learn how to be present, how to love without walls. But life wasn't going to let any of them off easy. One afternoon, while Amber was reading a story to the twins in the sprawling library, the phone rang sharply. Charles answered, his face darkening as he listened. Problems at the office? Amber asked gently after he hung up. He nodded. Yes. The company's facing a hostile takeover. It's more than business, it's personal. They're trying to strip everything away, including my reputation. Amber frowned. She saw the fear in his eyes. The same fear that had probably kept him distant from his family, the fear of losing everything. Maybe this is a sign, Amber said quietly. That you need to stop fighting alone. Charles looked at her, the vulnerability still raw. I don't know how to ask for help. I built this alone. But you don't have to keep doing it alone, Amber said, reaching out to squeeze his hand. You have people who care now. You have your boys, and you have me. For the first time, Charles smiled, a real smile, not the forced one he wore at board meetings. That night, Amber stayed late, helping Charles prepare for the next day's crucial meeting. As she packed up her things to leave, Charles stopped her. "Thank you," he said simply. "For saving my boys. For saving me." Amber looked at him, her heart swelling. Sometimes, it takes falling to realize who's there to catch you. The road ahead was uncertain. The challenges were many, and the stakes high. But for the first time, Amber and Charles faced them together, a millionaire and a waitress, bound by a moment of courage and the fragile hope of redemption. And the twins? They slept soundly that night, safe and loved, unaware of the storm swirling around their family, but forever changed by the woman who refused to look away. In the weeks that followed, Amber became more than just a helper, she became a part of the Jameson family's fragile new beginning. She attended doctor's appointments for the boys, helped organize Charles's hectic schedule, and even offered quiet comfort when the pressure from the business world began to seep into the home. Despite her exhaustion, Amber found herself energized by the connection she was building. For the first time in years, she felt seen. Not just as a waitress or a woman struggling to make ends meet, but as someone who mattered. One rainy evening, as Amber helped tuck Ethan and Evan into bed, Charles lingered by the doorway. His usually guarded expression softened as he watched the twins giggle at her silly voices. "Amber," he said quietly, "I don't know how I ever got so lost. I was chasing everything, but almost lost the most important things." She smiled gently. "It's never too late to find your way back." That night, Charles opened up about his past, about the loneliness that came with his wealth, the pressure to always appear strong, and the fear that drove him to keep his family at a distance. Amber listened without judgment, understanding that behind the millionaire's polished exterior was a man who simply didn't know how to ask for help. "I'm going to fight for my family," Charles said firmly. "But I want to fight the right way this time." Amber nodded. "And you won't be alone." The next day brought a new challenge. News broke of a scandal targeting Charles's company, threatening to destroy everything he'd built. The media swarmed, rumors flew, and the weight of public scrutiny pressed heavily on the Jameson name. Amber stood by Charles's side as he faced the storm, offering steady support and reminding him of what truly mattered. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Charles looked at Amber and said, "You saved my sons, but you've saved me too." Amber smiled through tears. Sometimes, saving someone else is the only way to save yourself. Together, they weathered the crisis, their bond growing stronger with every trial. And through it all, the twins thrived, laughing, playing, and healing, surrounded by love that no amount of money could buy. Amber's courage and kindness had sparked a transformation, proving that sometimes, the most unexpected heroes change the course of lives forever. As the company's crisis slowly began to stabilize, Charles started to open his home and heart even more. He invited Amber to family dinners, introduced her to old friends, and began attending therapy sessions with the twins, something he'd never considered before. Amber watched the man evolve before her eyes, shedding layers of pride and fear, replaced by humility and hope. One afternoon, Amber found herself sitting beside Charles in the grand living room, sunlight streaming through tall windows. The twins were playing nearby, their laughter filling the air like music. "I've been thinking," Charles began, his voice softer than usual. "You came into our lives when we needed you most. I want to do more than just thank you." Amber looked at him, curious but cautious. "I want to invest in your future," he said. "Help you with your dreams, whatever they might be." Amber's heart pounded. She'd never imagined such an offer. She thought of the small apartment she rented, the bills she struggled to pay, and the dreams she had quietly tucked away, dreams of going back to school, maybe opening a small bakery someday. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Charles urged. "Because you deserve it." Tears welled in Amber's eyes, not just from gratitude, but from the realization that her life was changing in ways she'd only dared to hope for. Over the next months, with Charles's support, Amber enrolled in night classes and began planning her bakery. The twins continued to flourish, their laughter a constant reminder of the miracle that had brought them all together. But it wasn't just Charles who changed. Amber found strength she didn't know she had, strength born from kindness, from believing in herself, and from the unexpected family she'd found. One evening, as Amber closed the diner for the last time, she paused at the door, looking up at the sky. The stars shone bright, each one a tiny beacon of hope. She smiled, knowing that sometimes, when the world looks away, all it takes is one person to step forward, to catch the falling, to heal the broken, and to change everything forever. The bakery's grand opening was a small celebration but felt monumental to Amber. Friends from the neighborhood showed up, the twins ran around with their father, and Charles stood quietly beside Amber, proud and humble. As she cut the ribbon, Amber thought back to that day on the sidewalk, the fear, the chaos, the moment she chose not to look away. That choice had changed everything. Charles cleared his throat and raised a glass. To Amber, he said, his voice steady and full of emotion. Who taught me what truly matters? The crowd cheered, but Amber's eyes found the twins, smiling and safe, and the man who had learned to be their father. In that moment, Amber understood the real power of kindness and courage. That it could break through walls money couldn't touch, that it could heal wounds no wealth could buy. Her journey from waitress to family friend, mentor, and dream chaser wasn't just about saving two boys from a fall. It was about rising together, about how one small act could create a ripple that changed many lives. And in a world that often looks away, Amber proved that seeing someone in need, and stepping forward, is the greatest strength there is. The end was just a beginning.